This is episode 23 of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm Jeff Kaiser. My guest for December 2021 is someone that is known for one of the most premier electronic music labels out there, Projekt Records, also known for Blue Tape for a Black Girl or Black Tape for a Blue Girl. I think I totally just screwed that up. Sam Rosenthal. Hey, Sam, how are you?
Hey there. Thank you for bringing me on.
It's a pleasure having you on. You've done so much in the world of music, everything from songwriting to composing to playing. So how does one do so much?
Time. I've been at it for a long time. I don't know. I really think that getting out of South Florida was part of my drive, and doing things that could get me out was part of it. So I worked on that.
So what you're saying is you don't miss Florida?
Yes, that is correct. I mean, I like seeing my family, but the place, no.
You bounced around a bit though, right? So where are you at right now? Portland, Oregon, is that right?
Yeah, correct. I'm in Portland now. I went to college in Orange County, California. Then I lived in Los Angeles, then Chicago, then Brooklyn for like 13 years, and now here for 8. So
wow,
moving around.
Yeah. Where's the next place you're moving to after Portland?
Yeah, I haven't decided that yet. My partner likes it here, so I'm here for now.
There you go. But you were born in Fort Lauderdale, right? What hospital were you born at?
Well, there probably only was one back then. Whatever the one is in downtown Fort Lauderdale, I don't actually know the name.
I think it is. I thought it was Fort Lauderdale
General or
yeah. Those things, they're not like football and baseball places where they change their name every so often with different corporate names. You know, they pretty much stay the same, I think.
Yeah, they don't have corporate sponsors, but that might help.
Right. Exactly. So what are your earliest memories? Like when did you first discover music when you were growing up in South Florida?
You know, my dad, who he was like a generation older than most kids' parents at the time. He was really into sound effect records. So we did not have much music at home that I remember, you know. And so I think, I kind of remember like Bohemian Rhapsody in the car going to the beach or something like that. But that was like a friend's mom playing it.
Okay.
So I'm thinking like whenever that was, 75, kind of glammy rock was probably early. And I mean, a little bit later, She down there, I don't know if they're still around. They would play the expected rock and roll, but also the occasionally weird things like the B-52s or something. So, you know, it was definitely the radio that started music. It wasn't something passed on.
Right. Thinking about the sound effects, did you have a favorite sound effect at that age?
No, it was annoying. I think he had like one Herb Alpert album.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Was Herb Alpert? He did Whipped Cream, right?
Yeah, Whipped Cream. Yeah, probably that one. But
yeah, that's the one most
very
of us know.
Influential.
Although the cover is most memorable. I mean,
that's probably why he had it. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it was like, I think I gravitated towards the weird music. I mean, because I remember really liking Alice Cooper and buying Alice Cooper records at the flea market, and Queen, you know, I didn't have Queen, but they were just sort of weird compared to the sort of corporate or Southern rock that was pretty prevalent. I lived in Cooper City by Davie. I went to school in Davie, so it was very like, you know, more country-ish oriented.
Yeah. And Davie's changed a lot. I don't even recognize it when I go back down there. I'm like, is this still Davie? So what was it like for you when you were kind of growing up down there?
I was more introverted than my brother or sister or the people in the neighborhood. So I think I was sort of not as in the crowd.
Okay.
And it was just like, yeah, jumping forward. I remember just hanging out with my drummer at his parents' house in some nice part of Plantation, and some jerks riding by in their car and shouting out, you know, shit. And it was just like, you know, it wasn't the place to be weird at the time.
Right.
You know.
Did you gravitate to other kids that were kind of like yourself, like introverts? And is that how you kind of got into other types of music, was from the people you were hanging out with?
Well, it is really weird because, yeah, I had some weird friends in middle school and we drew comics and stuff. But the kid who played Gary Newman for me was, total country boy, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's this kid who gave me a Gary Newman single. And I was just like, whoa, that's bizarre,
Yeah.
And and I guess that was like 79 when Cars came out. So that's a bit later. But yeah, it was sort of these weird comic-y drawing friends, then more just the stoners in high school, you know. And the first show I saw was Jethro Tull in 1979 at the Sportatorium.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, and I think my brother went to see Angel the night I saw Apocalypse Now. Just the weird metal bands that came through.
Were your parents taking you at all to concerts when you were growing up?
No, there was, some people in the neighborhood who were older who had cars. And then, once I started going to like alternative music scene or whatever you call it, I think my sister was driving at that point. But oh no, my parents weren't into that.
At what point did you discover local music?
That was through Open Records when they were in the Progresso Plaza. Mm-hmm. So, so I have like copies of my fanzine here, and that's kind of like how I can remind myself that it used to be like paper, and it's like, okay, Blue Oyster Cult's the first band, but then you have Charlie Pickett and Ultravox like within a year.
Yeah.
So that makes it like 82 when I don't know when opened in the Progresso, but going there and like I was into like the New Romantic Japan and Ultravox kind of bands.
Oh yeah.
And, Specs didn't have it. Peaches probably didn't have it, but at Open, they would special order if they weren't going to carry it.
You can really hear that sound in your first earliest recordings as well.
Oh yeah, I was sort of the synth pop side, Ultravox or Soft Cell, but then also like the Tangerine Dream or Brian Eno side. And since I don't have a good singing voice, I was doing instrumental music back then. Everything except for a couple songs when I was in Florida was instrumental.
For those that are not familiar with your fans, can you give a little bit of history about it, kind of when you started it and the name?
Yeah, so the final name was Alternative Rhythms. But it started out being called Songs from the Wood, which is a Jethro Tull album title. And that was like 82. And then I thought, I'm going to get sued for this. So I decided to change the name. And Alternative Rhythms was Ultravox have an album. No, wait, Japan have an album called Obscure Alternatives. And Ultravox had a song called Dangerous Rhythms. So I mashed alternative rhythms together. Nice. But that was before it was called alternative music. Then I think it was still probably called college rock or something like that. So, years later, alternative sort of became the term for what AP Alternative Press came out. So it was just the word I slapped on there. Oh, wait, that cover I held up has the name backwards because it was the last issue. So,
I noticed that. There you go.
Name forwards with like a New Order interview.
Yeah.
And so it started out. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Were you doing those interviews yourself, or did you kind of have people that were doing it along with you that were kind of helping out?
Yeah, I had other people doing them. I was like a journalism major in high school and into college. And so I kind of eventually met people to do it, do many of the interviews, but I would kind of like, at that point, the labels would set them up through me. So like this New Order one, I think it was a guy in Atlanta who did it. And a guy in Italy put together a Cabaret Voltaire book of like every interview he could find with them. And so he got in touch with me recently to get the same guy in Atlanta did the interview for.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So there, it kind of was, schizophrenic when you look at what's in it, because some of it's the more jangly guitar stuff. Some of it's the electronic stuff. And I guess I'm jumping forwards, but
that's okay. No, that's perfect. Yeah. Is that the kind of stuff you were also really into? Is because you mentioned, all kinds of different music at this point. And was indie rock also on your radar in addition to electronic music?
Yeah, in the bands in South Florida, I really like Charlie Pickett. I really like The Chant. A guy in high school had a band called the RAF, Rusty. And later he had DT Martyrs. And so they were all, now now I have perspective on, oh, okay, I understand Charlie is very in the vein of Velvet Underground or, 70s Rolling Stones, let's say. But at the time, I wasn't as familiar with, I didn't even know the Velvet Underground then. So I didn't know where to place it, where it fits in with things.
Right.
And also REM, they came through back then when they still weren't singing words, So it was sort of that more jangly sound I was really into as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of that going on at that time, and a lot of really great bands that were coming up and everything. Did you have a chance to see any of those bands as they kind of came to town too?
Yeah, I guess like I just found some photos of the Chant opening for the swimming pool cues, and that I don't know where they would have played, but it was probably a club of 50 people, somewhere on the beach probably, but. This was before Churchill's, before Flynn's, It was like, there was some club in Hollywood Beach and I was underage. So, I'm making a fanzine and I could get in, There was one club that had this stage, which I believe was a piece of plywood across some booths. So it was just like really like this bouncy stage. And I think I saw Futurist there, if you remember Jeremy's band. And there was Radio Berlin. There was a band Black Box Approach on the more very synth side of things. And so there was, I think the kind of more punk rock bands, I don't think I was as familiar with them. I remember seeing Henry Rollins when he was doing spoken word, probably Black Flag at some bigger venue down in Miami. I can't remember which one. But I think I really got into Soft Cell, and there was like one guy in school who liked Soft Cell, and that was like the only person I knew.
Right. What inspired you to do a fanzine in the first place?
Ego. It was really like, ooh, I know cool music. I want to tell people about this cool music. And that's sort of the motivation for starting a label as well, was, there's this cool music I like. I want you to hear it, check it out.
Right.
And so I was a journalism major. Oh, this is the thing, to do. And I don't remember. I think it was like 20,000 copies in the final issues or something like that. And they got up to Atlanta and Athens as well. And
nice.
That weird things printed on paper, which no one does anymore. Yeah. Just, who is this?
Great.
Monty Montgomery. Oh, I know who did that. Lone Justice, New Order, Minutemen.
Nice.
A bunch of reviews. Some of those are bigger names. A lot of those are bigger names, I guess.
Right.
But there was a lot of like local bands advertising in it and stuff.
Yeah. And thinking about some of the different venues and stuff, you mentioned a few. Were you also promoting the venues as well, in addition to the music?
Only insofar as they advertised in it, not promoting in the sense of, Alternative Rhythms never did any shows or anything.
Gotcha.
But I remember, I suspect when I was handing out the fanzines, dropping them off, probably I had flyers for shows of friends' bands or whatever, and I will just bring up the issue that got the most controversy was Gay Cowboys and Bondage.
Nice.
I don't know if you're,
I am familiar with them.
You are?
Yeah, I'm familiar with them.
I think this issue mostly got thrown away. I think the people in the stores just had a shit when they saw the band's name.
You're right.
So I remember dropping them off and it's like, about that.
I'm pretty sure I had read somewhere, it's been a while, but I read something about a lot of the controversy and rumblings about their name. And I guess it didn't go over very well at that time. So
I'm sure. Because I don't think it's around anymore. There was Rag magazine that Dino had been making forever. And so I think I did like a one-day internship at Rag, and it was the day Charlie was there designing the cover for like the single.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure I don't know which one of the singles it was, but so really what I did was I sat there and watched him work on the layout for it, but then so it was never like it was competition, because Rag was really just live show reviews and a lot of club ads, and mine was more like interviews and. He came out every month. He was a business. He was making, that was his career. His living.
Yeah. And this wasn't done on purpose, but the irony that you're my last guest for this year and Charlie was my last guest for last year. So thinking about the times you got a chance to see Charlie Pickett, any memories you have of seeing him live or just interacting with him?
So there was a show called Rock and Roll Ski. I don't know. That was at the Polish American Club so, it's one of Walter's ads.
Oh, nice.
And Open Records, looks like Open put it on or put it together. And this one is the Eat the Throbs, Larry Joe Miller and the Rockabilly Rockets. And I remember the farm stores next to the Polish American Club, going over there to shoot photos because it had light. I didn't have a flash on my camera. So I remember, Charlie standing by the farm store sign with the fruit, the ice cream, whatever listed there.
Nice.
And I remember going to Charlie's apartment, maybe in Dania, somewhere, and bricks holding up. Oh, it's like, oh, look at that. He has bricks holding up pieces of wood to put records on it. How, I was a dumb kid still.
How old were you? How old were you at that time?
I would say between 16 and 18.
Okay, yeah, you were a kid.
Because I didn't drive. My sister drove us, and she's probably like, okay, passing time, waiting for this to get done. It was, I suspect I was interviewing Charlie, some tape deck. But I just, like I said, I didn't have the context for what his music was doing. So to me, it was like completely, wow, what is this? Because it was, a mix of 70s rock, but also with the, whatever the new bands at that time were being called. Were they new? I mean, who did Slow Death? Remind me of the original.
What?
The Flaming Lips or somebody, bands like that.
Yeah. So like that psychedelic rock kind of sound, or like
yeah, he definitely did have. He didn't really have the psychedelic element, where I think maybe the chant had a little bit. I mean, REM did have a psychedelic element, but people said that at the time, So I think his was a little more straight ahead rock. And I saw Charlie play in Brooklyn. I mean, now it's like 9 years ago, maybe. They were still
okay.
Great.
Yeah. Did he remember you from that time?
Yeah. I mean, Ted, who ran Open with Leslie, was in New York then. I don't know if he still is. And yeah, I mean, I just occasionally say hi on Facebook to Charlie, or like post something about something. So yeah, we're still in touch.
That's nice. Good. What were some of your earliest jobs? And you were like, you were a kid, you were going to shows. Were you working at record stores at all, or what were you doing work-wise?
Well, so first I worked at Wendy's in Davie.
Okay.
And then later I worked at Hot Records in Davie, which was a mostly used record store that was really dirty inside. And I was like the only other employee besides the owner who was a W.C. Fields impersonator as his other gig. So it was mostly sitting around waiting for a customer to come in. It was nice. Poorly advertised. And I remember, like, I don't know, now when I go to a record store and they have like the 10-cent spin, it's like, oh yeah, that's all the shit we used to sell. All that crap you couldn't get rid of that would just sort of fill the bins, and then you get something new and it would go in front and then leave. But oh god, Loggins and Messina or whatever that awful generic music was. But then it also, I mean, 8-tracks and cassettes, and then people would come in and try to steal the 8-tracks. It was
were you all go ahead.
So that was like downtown Vegas. There was a Napa auto parts store in the little plaza thing, and a bar next door. So that job. Then that was, I don't know, a year and a half, and then I started working at Peaches by the mall.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. With Broward Mall. I don't know what it's called now.
I think it is still called Broward Mall. I think
okay.
so. Yeah. There's some things, I know, as much as stuff changes down there, there are some things that still remain. Thankfully, it's how we remember. I guess we're in the right place.
Yeah, there's probably a furniture store there now or whatever. But Peaches, I was the import buyer at Peaches, so bring in the weird stuff. This one, 2 bins in the store, and the rest was.
Yeah. Is that where you were? Is that where you were kind of learning some of, just in terms of the networking and relationships, and bringing in some of that other music that people may not have been listening to at that time?
Yeah, but they didn't do local stuff. I mean, they would bring it in from Gem or Green World, so it would be much more Dead or Alive, or
okay,
Love and Rockets or something. It would be more what was popular in England. They didn't really do any of the local stuff. I mean, Yesterday and Today in Miami, and then Open moved to Miami. Those were like the 2 kind of main places that had really interesting and good music and deep selection of weird stuff.
Yeah.
And so, and there were, I'm sure, other stores that I don't remember the name now. And it's like, I mean, Frankie Goes to Hollywood was weird at that time, you know? So it's like, oh my God, this store has a Frankie 12-inch, you know?
Yeah.
So,
and there was a lot of controversy too around the lyrics of Relax, wasn't there at that time?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it was like, it's like he's singing about non-straight subjects and actually saying it, you know. I mean, like Soft
Right.
Cell, he never sang a gender in almost all the first album.
Never thought about that.
But anyway, yeah, so yeah, the first Soft Cell album he was very vague and, you know, got by with it. But anyhow, yeah, so definitely Open was the place that I would discover music, and I knew Leslie and Ted, so it would be like, hey, check this one out. But also there was a magazine called Option, OP, and Sound Choice, which were like West Coast, and they'd have like 40 pages of album reviews, all these like little 2-inch reviews in it. So if there was something interesting, I would write to the band and they would send me something to review.
Oh, nice.
And so that's how I heard, you know, more diverse stuff. And then, you know, I got on the mailing list for some labels too, but so there was probably overabundance of A&M record reviews because they were sending me stuff, you know.
Right.
And so, but I also feel like it was so hard to have context of all the music back then without the internet. You know, now it's like, I wonder what the third Cat Stevens album sounded like. You can go play it, you know. But back then it's like, am I going to go buy it, you know, to figure out if this band sounds like Cat Stevens, you know?
Right.
So it was, you know, it was easy to have no context for what people were doing. And there was, I guess the Cichlids were a bit before I started doing my fanzine, but then she had a band called Nouveau Riche, I think, which I like saw open for the Psychedelic Furs. But even with that, I mean, I didn't have any context of what their single sounded like, you know.
Yeah. Was that Debbie you were talking about?
I think so. Yeah.
I forget her last name, but
I think she went by Debbie Cichlid at the time.
Okay.
I mean, wasn't it Robert Mascaro was her manager? I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So there was a band here. Let me see. I find the issue. There was a band called The Sleep of Reason.
Yeah.
Aha, here we go. The Sleep of Reason issue. And Oscar, one of these guys, I think that one right there, Oscar, he became the vocalist of my band in Black Tape for a Blue Girl. And I guess we met because they actually had a publicist who got in touch with me. And so I went to see them play at one of those things where the thing opens up and it becomes a stage, you know, like an outdoor festival.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw him play at one of those. I wrote some songs with lyrics and asked Oscar to sing it. So he sang on a cassette. I guess it was mid to late 85 before I moved to California. And then when I started writing songs with lyrics, I asked him to sing on the record. And I think The Sleep of Reason was broken up. He also had El Duende, I think Picasso Trigger, and there's a third band he had as well down there. But he would like fly out to California, or I would fly to Florida, and he'd record the vocals for my band, Black Tape for a Blue Girl.
Yeah. I think I have him coming on next year.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you. You linked us up and I appreciate that. And excited to have him on. So you just didn't have the chops, you felt like, to do your own vocals as well?
I thought that I did not. I'm just like, I don't have a front person vocal style. I don't have a style. I mean, I write the melodies and the words, and like on the most recent album, you know, the music, all of it as well. But I know enough that I'm not a singer, so I don't force people to hear that. I get somebody who actually is good at it.
Right.
To do it. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like backing vocalists, or I mean, kind of, you know, lead guitarist vocalist, which is okay, like Keith Richards sing a song every now and then, or let that guy sing a song every now and then, but it's not, you know, it's not as strong as the real front person's vocals.
Right.
So I know what the melody is. I know when I'm recording, no one really knows the overall album except for me, because it's not like we're a band that hangs out together. And so it's like, these are the songs you will be singing, and I send them guide tracks, which are much more listenable now than they were back then.
Where did you learn to pick up a lot of this stuff? Was this when did that happen for you?
I mean, I don't have any training on music, so I just sort of do it. I mean, there's Brian Eno, I think, calls it like a non-musician. And it's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm playing. I just know I like that together. That sounds good to me.
Right.
So like Brian Viglione, who was in the Dresden Dolls, he's the drummer. He played drums and guitar and stuff. Okay, now it's 12 years ago, that album. But, what key is this in? I don't know. Play along till you figure it out, I just like, musicians, they know that kind of stuff, and so I'll say, hey, to whoever, can you play some guitar over this? And they're like, okay, what's the tempo? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Let me look and see if I wrote it down. It's just, I just record what I want to hear. And now with the computers, there's a lot of editing that's involved. Back then.
Sure.
I think the early albums, to me, they're very primitive, but people like them. But to me, it was limited by, at first it was a 4-track and then an 8-track. So it wasn't as, now you can do a lot more and I can fix things better.
When did you buy your first keyboard?
The first thing I got was I'm going to guess 81 or 82. It was a Radio Shack concert made Moog MG1.
Nice.
And the ad is like Elton John holding one up, and he's like, I'll hold this up, give me my money.
Right.
He never played it. But, I still have it. I've had it repaired like so many times.
Oh, wow.
But it makes cool Moog sounds. And it was polyphonic, where the other one, I think the Rogue, was the equivalent kind of keyboard from the same time that wasn't Radio Shack, but it was only monophonic. So, and then I got a Chord Poly 61. And like the photo you used was, I did a concert at my community college at BCC. And I had 3 of the Poly 61s, which they had a arpeggio, so you could latch things and play over it. But I was thinking, I never rehearsed those shows because I borrowed the school's keyboards. I only had one myself. So I had a noon set and a 7:30 set. I'm like, I could tell I learned when I actually had to play the whole show.
Right.
So I got better over 7 hours.
What was the show? Was it just like some like talent type show? Like what was the show for?
I was killing time in the video arts program at BCC, not wanting to go off to college.
Okay.
And so I created video and then I played to the video. And so it was an installation, I guess. And that was March of 85.
Okay. Nice. I went to BCC for 1 year, I think, but it was much later, and nothing like that happened when I was going there.
Was it the Davie campus, or was there a different one?
Coconut Creek.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was in Davie. Is it still there? I don't know.
Yeah, that I don't know. I didn't know there was a campus in Davie. So.
Oh yeah,
maybe not.
It was right by Nova High School, and so the art department, the head, his name was Steve Elliott, and he. He introduced me to like Philip Glass and Laurie Anderson and like, modern minimalism kind of stuff. And so I think I already knew Laurie Anderson, but he definitely was into like other weird music. He like, played John Cage and stuff.
Okay.
And so I think the problem with most teachers is they feel most of the kids are really, they're very focused on what is expected to do in college. And so he was into, you're doing something weird. Okay, let's staple videotape up all over the walls, So it was something different to do. And I love the weird video artists. I mean, like, I know Bill Viola, he's gotten really big. There was another guy who he did like possibly New Order videos, DAF videos, but like some of the people who were 70s video artists started doing music videos because they could finally do stuff that some record label paid them to do.
Where were you watching some of these things? Because obviously the internet wasn't there at that time. So where were you seeing this?
Oh, it was the professor playing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a video artist named Namjoon Pike who probably was based in New York. He was Korean, and they flew him down to the school to like just do what he does, which is basically just goes into the video studio and fucks around with everything. Okay. Lets the character generator run and does whatever kind of effects he can do with the equipment. But he was like a well-known video artist and then got much bigger. So, but it wasn't like you could see it anywhere.
Yeah.
There's a video, there's a Bowie video where I think he's pretending he's playing guitar, and the woman from La La Human Steps is dancing with him, and it's this weird video character generator shit. And I think that is sort of that era of video art, which was really just playing with the equipment, making weirdness out of it.
Did your curiosity ever take you in that direction at any point?
Well, so I went to California for TV film,
Mm.
and so the idea was, after journalism wasn't working as a plan, TV film seemed like a good plan. And so I went for that, but then I just kind of realized, you're going to end up being a grip on some shitty movie. That's going to be the pinnacle of your career here, because, it was very hard for good movies to get made, and I think it always is. And then I stumbled into computer graphics for corporations. I paid really well, and I was like, I'm going to do that. But then I got out of college in '88, and by '91, my record label was so busy that I just had to start doing it full time, because I was doing computer graphics out of town, and this was like fax machine era, and you can't run a business away from your business, So I had to kind of stop doing the computer work and just focus on the label.
What made you decide to start a label?
It really was, you're writing about bands in a fanzine that no one can hear. So I thought, I'll put out compilations of some of the music I'm writing about so that people can hear this stuff. And so it was cassettes that I dubbed at home. And then I think that of the first 5, maybe 2 or 3 were compilations on cassette on the label.
Right.
And so it just sort of grew out of that.
I think one of the ones that I remember, well, for one, they're hard to find. That's number one. And number 2, I never realized, especially growing up in South Florida, I never realized that there was all this electronic music that was going on down there. Did you have to kind of gather up the groups that, like, the people you knew who were doing that and say, hey, I'm doing a compilation, do you want to be on? Like, how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I something like that. I don't remember. I mean, I like Bob Roop, who was in the Bobs.
Yeah, the Bobs.
He did a couple instrumental tracks on one of the cassettes. And I mean, I don't honestly, I mean, it wasn't really played live, so I don't remember how I knew he was even doing that. Yeah, I just remember the Bobs. There was somebody besides Bob in that band that I think was in another band too. But yeah, I think more of it wasn't as much of the synth pop side. I mean, I think there was some of that, but I think it was more of the kind of ambient-ish electronic music on those early cassettes. But I think it was also that it was a way for me to put whatever I was doing out on something. And I ended up, I'm going to guess maybe there was 13 cassettes on the label before I moved to California. But, it's just funny because somewhere I have a little book where I keep track of each sale. It's like, yes, this one sold 3 copies. Yay, but it existed as a thing. And then some of them sold 40 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then I went to California. I finished Black Tape for a Blue Girl, which was sort of half vocal, half electronic instrumental. Kind of in the way that Heroes or Low has a vocal side and the instrumental side. And then that one, I'd already put out an LP by then. There was a guy named Oni who was in Miami who did electronic music, and I think he helped me mix it. And then on the road, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I went to some studio in Miami and mixed a whole album in 3 hours. It was like, the guy was like, are you insane? You're just churning through this stuff. And I'm like, isn't this how you do it? So I hear that now, and it's like a rushed mess to me, the mix. But, it was the first album, and there's people who it's still their favorite album because it was the first thing they heard from the band. Where to me, it's just, it was primitive. It wasn't
right.
Even though the songs took more time to record, but I was still recording on a Porta studio in my dorm room. But so that came out on LP, and it was strangely like, I didn't know what kind of music it was. I knew the 4AD label out of England, but
yeah,
what was called goth in America, some of the people liked it, and I was like, oh, is it goth music? Okay, if you say so.
That's some of the stuff. And again, I didn't grow up listening to that and discover that stuff till later. But the first time that I listened to some of your later stuff, that's what kind of came to me, Dead Can Dance, that type of sound. How did you discover? Because I mean, I'm going to just assume that they were an influence if they weren't keep me honest. But 'cause I hear that though, like in some of your music as well.
Yeah, I would say that Spleen and Ideal and In the Realm of a Dying Sun, which I think are their second and third album, I could be wrong, were the ones that I was the most into because they were sort of the bombastic, sort of Middle Ages sounding music, where they then went on to do more world music stuff, which even though I saw more often on those tours because they were bigger and touring more, it's really that early, really dark, bombastic stuff that I like the most. And I would say that, I mean, it's influenced insofar as it was in my head, but not insofar as I could play or knew what they were playing. Once again, I didn't come from Brendan is playing this here, And so 4AD, the Cocktail Twins, That Can Dance. I think This Mortal Coil is the one that bands compared to most, because that was Ivo's band, and he just brought in people from all the other bands to be on his project. And Black Tape brought in a variety of people too. So the third album, I remember when it came out, and that's when you would go to a record store and ask them to carry it, and they would say, "Oh, we have to listen to this to see if it's." And the woman was like, "Is this a compilation?" And it's like, "No, it's just I have all these different singers,
Yeah.
So I think This Mortal Coil was often a comparison. And once again, he did a lot of covers in This Mortal Coil. I think there's one album that's all covers where Black Tape didn't, just because I couldn't figure out how to play anything else but my own. But yeah, there was sort of in the first Black Tape came out in '86, and there was sort of this: if you could put it out on vinyl, you were more established. You look more. Anyone could dub a cassette at home, but you have to gather again the money to make an LP.
Yeah.
So the first one came out on LP, and I think that helped the band just because there was they called it home taping. Was it called home trading, cassette trading, whatever they called it? They called it something where people just trade cassettes. I made my figures, let's check it out. And I think a lot of the music got heard by people giving it away to other musicians and passing it around. And so I can't give you that LP. That cost me like $10 to make, So then you're out there trying to sell LPs. So it jumped up as far as what you kind of needed to do, so they weren't ending up all sitting in your garage.
Right. Did you have connections at that time where you can get a lot of stuff made? Because obviously, you're young, right? I mean, you're probably not making a ton of money. Did you have make any kind of connections to help you produce some of the releases at that point?
Well, I got financial aid to go to college, and I used it to put out a record instead. And so
nice.
that helped, but it wasn't. No, I mean, I had to look for a distributor back then, and they didn't get it. There was probably other distributors who understood what the genre was, but the one I found, they didn't know what they were doing as far as for what I was releasing. But it was just sort of like, somehow I sent it to some of the fanzines that liked it, but they were very much on the goth side of things. And so, it's not like Sisters of Mercy. It's not a band. It's not like Bauhaus. It's not like Susie. They're all to me rock bands that are in that genre, where mine was primarily electronics and vocals and some acoustic guitar. So it was definitely like, it wasn't even like Dead Can Dance, because Dead Can Dance was still, Brendan was proficient on a lot of instruments, and it was definitely it was more complex than what I was doing, I think. So it was sort of, lucked into the goth fans, and that was '96. In the first 3 years, there was 3 albums, so there was, it was also coming out quicker back then than now.
One of the genres that Black Tape gets labeled as is dark wave. Now, what do you remember of the origins of that term? Because obviously it's not a term that was around.
I came up with it.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, there was in Germany, there was like cold wave, and there was dark wave as 2 words. So I had a mail order catalog, and I just jammed the words together and called it dark wave. So to me, the genre was like this blanket term for a wide variety of things. There was a band called Crash Worship in LA, which was very tribal, and like they burned things, and it was kind of like they were, to me, that was dark wave too. It was just sort of whatever was off the radar in '95, '93, whenever that term was. I would just clump it all together so that I could sell it in the mail order catalog.
Yeah. Did
But
you?
now
Okay.
it's sort of more, people consider it to be more like the dark bands that are not quite goth or goth bands. Where then I thought, Project Pitchfork or Front 242, they could all be dark wave. Why not? Because they were still, somewhat off the radar.
Yeah. Did you realize at that time that you were defining a subgenre in a way?
No. I mean, the other one was dark cabaret. Later was another word that I was using to call a couple bands that style, and and then I put out some compilations because it was, the Dresden Dolls sort of pre-steampunk, whatever punk Dresden Dolls were kind of thing. I think they called it, what did they call it? Something punk. Punk cabaret or something.
Okay.
It was really like, no band, as a record label, no band wants to be pigeonholed into one sound.
Sure.
But people like having genres so they can say, oh, I like that sound. Maybe I'll like this band, And so they were just sort of terms to kind of help people hear the music. And I mean, now it's so easy because it's like, oh, here's an interesting band. I'm going to play them on Spotify and see what they're like. Much easier than, the way it used to be to try to discover music.
Right. What do you? Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to ask you, what do you remember about making the Rope LP?
I was in my dorm room. I had moved to California. I was very unhappy, and I was just sort of doing that as an escape from being unhappy. And
it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, and it had to come together really fast too, because I moved to California in like February of '86, and I recorded with Oscar in the summer. So, and at the same time, I have a whole other cassette. It's called Before the Buildings Fell, of electronic music I made at the same time. And so I'd say there was three styles. There was this, what would be called dark wave gothy songs. There was ambient Eno-ish songs. And then there were these more Tangerine Dream-ish sequencer electronic songs.
Right.
And the sequencer stuff was kept off the Rope, and it became its own cassette. And but the weird thing working with Oscar, who was he was older than me by just a few years, but had been playing in bands for years and was really talented. And I'm like coming in going, no, sing it this way. What do I know? But I just had this idea of what I was wanting to do. And I knew Oscar was a really great vocalist. And I knew he could do what I was asking. It's just, I had my ideas of what I wanted. So I don't know if Oscar felt it, but I always felt this sort of conflict of being the director, telling someone who's talented, no, do it my way, So
were you friends? Were you actually like good friends before you got involved musically?
No. I mean, because he lived down in Miami and I was up in Cooper City. So it was really like, no, when we recorded, he'd come over, we'd hang out for 3 days. But, I would have written all these songs and it's really compacted. So you get to know somebody, but it's not like bands hanging out together or going on tour and knowing each other,
Right.
Which, I mean, I've been on tours with bands too, and it can be really annoying. So, Oscar, I mean, everything has been great with Oscar. I'm just saying with some people, you don't necessarily want to spend weeks at a time with them.
Totally get it.
So,
when was the first gig that you had?
So Black Tape didn't play live until 1986. No, 96, sorry, 10 years later.
Wow.
So when I moved to Chicago, I had another band named Thanatos with Pat Ogle from Florida. And Pat was in Chicago, Project was growing. I hired him to do publicity. And I'm pretty sure it was Pat's idea. Instead of trying to tour, let's do a festival and have everyone come to Chicago for a show. And it turned out that first show had like 1,000 people at it. It was like giant. And the second one a year later had like 1,100. And so Black Tape had to play live. And it's like, because we were one of the three biggest bands on the label. And I never played live and I didn't know what I was doing. So, we got it together. All right. Yeah. So in 96, when we played at the fest, I had never played live with the band. And I think Oscar, who had played live, ended up having more responsibility he didn't expect. As far as I feel like he kind of held us together. He knew what to do with the band and what to do on stage. Where I was just like I had to keep all the equipment going, the backing and the keyboards.
And it's interesting because when we play in America, the vocalists are where the audience focus. And when we play in Europe, which we haven't played that many times, but they talk to me because they think more about the songwriter. It's just this interesting difference of how people consider the art, I guess, you know, where I find what's interesting about my band is the singers, you know, that they're like interesting on stage, they're dynamic, and I'm just keeping it together.
Right.
But yeah, so
yeah. What was the first year you remember going to Europe?
To play, or I went in 89 to record, 88 to record with Sue, who sang on the second and third album. And so I had a friend in London who I stayed with, and that was, you know, oh, the world, so much more of it, you know. And then we played in, I think maybe 2002 or 4 in Germany, and then again in 2009 we played that same festival in Germany, in Leipzig, and we played in Prague and Romania.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was, you know, it's just they treat you so much better in Europe. they just treat bands better.
Yeah. Some of the album covers of Black Tape, they seem like they were inspired by some of the things in Europe. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, but did you feel like you were getting inspired for some of the album covers because you were traveling out there?
Well, the 2002 cover, The Scavenger Bride, the background is all from Prague, and it's, you know, it's a Photoshop of a photo from here and different images from Prague. And it fits. That album was a concept album that had this theme about 1913 Prague or whatever it was set. And I just think there's a European aesthetic to the band, perhaps. You know, like right now, Italy is where there's the most fan interest, interestingly. You know, the CD has been doing the best in Italy. I think that the passion of the music and the willingness to express those things, I think, goes over well in Italy, Mexico, you know, Brazil. I think the countries where we stereotypically think of the people as more passionate, you know, the music does have a connection there.
Any connection in Japan at all, or in Asia?
You know, it's one of those places I've never found any connection for the label or for the artists. There, I mean, I have a Chinese and a Russian bootleg of my band CDs. So someone over there decided it was worth putting out a bootleg. But, you know, I don't, I've never really heard much from people there.
Did you travel at all to South America?
No, I never have. I think, you know, I think it would be interesting. We played in Mexico once in 97, I think, and that had a really good turnout. So Oscar, he's in Miami, he's Cuban American, he speaks Spanish. That was so helpful in Mexico because, you know, him being able to talk to the audience down there was great. And I know this is just an excuse, but I grew up in Florida before a foreign language was required.
Right.
So I never learned anything. So
you always hear a lot of horror stories about traveling down there. How were you and when you went down there, safety wise? How was all of that when you went to Mexico?
Yeah, so our promoter was very concerned about our safety, and he did not want us out of sight. And so we were all fine, and we were the only band, I think, on my label who didn't get like sick down there from the water. But then Lisa, the flute player in my band, later went down to Mexico with Human Drama, and they played Mexico City, but also another city, and they had like problems with guns and stuff. And so we were very lucky that we had no problems at all. But we were really the hotel, the venue, the restaurant.
Right.
You know, our promoter kept an eye on us. So
that's good. Happen. Yeah, that's good. I'm sure it can be quite scary to be in a place like that and not know what's coming. But were you at all tapping into local musicians when you would take it on the road and maybe have any local players collaborate at all, or maybe some opening acts that were local?
Well, actually, yeah. In Atlanta, there was a band called the Changelings, and their keyboardist played piano on one song, and I don't know what year. And then the last time we were in Atlanta, which was 2009, their violinist Paul Mercer played on a couple songs. But I think it was just hard to do because there was no time. You know, you're driving in, setting up, sound checking. There wasn't the time to like integrate somebody into it. So no, I mean, and I also think it's, in the early days, the band was very much playing to backing tracks. So there wasn't the, oh, we'll throw you in and we'll just improvise around this and make it work. There was a time frame.
Yeah.
But then the 2009 band, I'd say half of it was on, I would play acoustic guitar. So half of it could be like played and then, which I found so much more fun, being a band that was so backing track based for so many shows. It's like, oh, we're playing live. We're screwing up. This is great. We're doing something. We're like, oh, he started singing there. Okay, we got to start playing this part of the song now.
Right.
So there was a lot more, fun as being in the band when you didn't know if you were going to be in the right spot at the right time.
I was wondering, just thinking about the music, definitely has that studio sound, but when you did it live, I was curious about the improv side of things. So did you ever just kind of go off one another and just kind of play at any one gig where that kind of happened?
Yeah. So Vicky Richards was the violinist on maybe 3-4 albums. She was based in Miami, and her background was she was trained classically, but then she went to India and brought in raga. And so she was very much about improvising. So everything I recorded with Vicky was, she played it and that's what you hear. And if she played it again, it was completely different. Okay. So with the 8-track, we were pretty limited to, oh, let's try that again, because then you lose that great thing. So Vicky played live with us only twice. We played at the Philadelphia Art Museum, and then the same night we played in New York opening for the Creatures. And so Vicky and then we played another show in Philadelphia. But Vicky and I, we had to stay in Philadelphia while the rest of the band went to New York to set up. So we had a much more improvised set of, just some drones that she would play over. But I do think that the band playing live, a lot of it was playing the melodies that were on the record. So it wasn't, hey, let's stretch this out and do something here. It was kind of sticking to the expected structure of the songs.
Right. And you think about some of these places that you had played at, was there anyone in particular in the States that really stood out to you as one of your favorites, maybe drew some of the best crowds that you really enjoyed playing?
I mean, the Project Fest in Chicago in 96 and 97 were definitely the most exciting, just because how many people had come. And they were 2-night things. I think there were 4 bands a night from the label. And so it was really, 95 to 98 was like sort of the pinnacle of the music industry as far as CDs getting sold, and people were still writing fan letters, so it felt like there was more connection back then, right? Where, you might get a ton of streams, but it's not like you feel any connection to the people. Cause we also did a lot of mail orders. So there was a lot of, just a lot of connection to the people back in that mid to late 90s period. But I kind of think of the shows more as like how things went interacting with the band, hanging out, because so much of playing live is in the van and in the hotel. And so, some tours have better memories than others just because of that. And the other problem was, I was driving most of the time because there were other people who might drink in some bands. And so it's like, oh, it's 3 a.m. We're driving to the next city. It's just, it's not the same memories as you can imagine bands who, we're playing at, Lincoln Center, or we're playing at the Beacon in New York, and we're hanging out in New York City for 3 days. So,
being on the road like that, did you have any favorite roadside attractions?
It was just so much driving. I know I should make it sound more romantic, but I just like the band Typo Negative were fans of band Lycia on the label, and I did sound for Lycia a few times opening for Typo, and just the way they'd be on tour half the year and removed from reality for so much. I wouldn't be able to deal with that, just that not having your coffee maker and your cat, and whatever, getting your mail, just boring reality stuff. And just, doing it for 2 weeks, it was just, and it was also mostly pre-internet too. Right. So you're just like, you're so disconnected from reality.
Yeah. And I had actually read that in an interview you had done before, how very pro like MP3 and digital music that you are, or at least you were, maybe you still are at this time. I would assume you still are. at this time. Is that correct?
Well, the interesting thing was at the very beginning, I was very pro because people could discover music that way. Finally, you didn't have to like have radios or press gatekeepers. And then this idealistic idea of music that people would buy got blown up, and then there was this period where it was very little income coming in either from CD or digital. And then I got pretty annoyed by the whole idea that all these torrents and all these locker sites are giving away albums. And then finally, I mean, and people were very against Spotify because of the low rates for streaming. But then the last 3 years has been insane that it's finally saved the music industry, basically. Streaming has finally added up to, I don't know what percentage it is of the royalties Project pays artists, 50, 60% is from streaming now. And so it turned around and saved things, where for there was this downward trend for quite a while. And I guess, so I had the fanzine, I had the band, but doing the record label is the main thing I do, my job.
Right.
And there's, I'm going to say 550 releases out on the label now. It's just not all physical. There's almost 300 that are digital only. And so I kind of see it across this wider range of artists versus just my own band. And, and everybody was going downhill as far as income for, let's say, 2010 to 2016 17. And then streaming just, turned around and is just, I love paying people royalties. I love being able to pay these people. I like their music.
Sure. Right.
And there was a pretty bleak period there. And now it's, now I love digital, and you can't, I think as a person running a label, you can't gatekeep what kind of music how they should hear it. If people all want to stream, fine by me,
Yeah.
Just people hearing music, and all I do is stream.
Didn't you put out some stuff by Steve Roach?
Oh, Steve has like 75 albums on the label. Yeah.
Yeah.
He is the most prolific person I know, and he has a ton on my label, and he has his own label that I help him get distribution on. And yeah, he's very busy.
How did you get linked up with him? Because he's someone I'm very familiar with as well, and he's been around for a long time.
Yeah, Steve's first release was it 79 or so, right around then.
70s, yeah.
And when I lived in California, Walter Holland I rented a room at his house, and he had the 8-track studio I used for some albums, and Steve produced Walter's second album. And so I guess it was around Dreamtime Return era, and I don't think I had released Oyuki Conjugate yet, this English kind of electronic tribally percussive band. But Dreamtime Return reminded me of that album, and so I said, hey, check out this band. And not that I thought they were influenced, they were just sort of working in the same realm as the more ethnic ambient on Dreamtime.
Yeah.
And then he was on Fortuna, and he was on Hearts of Space, and he was collaborating with an artist, Vidna Amana, who had already put out some things on Project. And so, as opposed to other record labels, I'm kind of like, whatever you want to put out, let's put it out, And at that time, there were other labels who were really they were just trying to stick their fingers into what he was doing and, have ideas, and it's
right.
Like, he has ideas. He doesn't need your record label ideas, and especially it was very limiting that, Hearts of Space wanted an album only every 18 months or whatever. And Steve is so prolific, and that kind of limitation, he did a lot of collaborations in the same time, but no, Steve is making way too much music to be limited like that. So, with Project, I'm like, sure, what do you got? Let's do it.
I was gonna kind of ask, in that same realm, talk a little bit about what kind of goes into having, putting out an artist on your label. What goes in? Are you a fan first? How does that all work for you when you put them out on your label?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the only criteria for Project is that I like it. It's something I would want to hear. And yes, it's limited. I don't put out like rock records because I just think the people who like Project aren't looking for a John Cale album, But yeah, it's really, if I like what they're doing, I'm pretty much like, give me a finished album. I'm fine with that. With Steve, I do cover design. I do, the artwork design, but I'm not like telling him what image to put on the cover. And there are some bands that are, more starting out, and maybe they have a bunch of songs and they don't know what order to put them in or something, and I'll give advice. But I try to find people who I like their music and then be more hands off as far as on their creative side unless they are looking for that.
Right.
In the 90s, I mean, the early Lycia, Soul Whirling Somewhere, I mixed their records at my studio because they didn't really have, I mean, my studio was pretty primitive too, but I had more gear than they had at the time. But as it goes on, I'm really like, people figure out what they want their sound to be like. And it's, you know, I mean, I'm not like, you know, in the movies, you see the record label people having all their great ideas and telling bands what to do.
Right.
And I mean, I do think producers are warranted on bands who are making music that should be more commercial. I think they might have ideas bands don't have. Or Brian Eno working with the Talking Heads, you know, you're bringing something to it. But I mean, we're sort of at a level where, am I going to cause that record to sell extra copies, or is it just somebody sticking their fingers in for no reason?
Was there a blueprint you were following when you were doing, as you did your label, or did you have someone that you could tap into who was already in that kind of business already?
No, I mean, I think it's just really figuring it out, you know, and in the 93 to 96 era, there was Love Spirals Downwards, Lycia, and Black Tape for a Blue Girl. And once I hooked up with a real distributor, Ryko, it was just like, it just took off. There was this interest, but we hadn't been able to get the CDs out to people. And so why was there interest? I mean, I just don't think there was as many bands doing that sound, or people doing it. It was still hard to have anyone even know you were doing it. Where now, you know, everyone has a Bandcamp and a SoundCloud, and it's much easier to at least make it available, but then you still have to get it heard.
Right. I did notice a lot of the Black Tape stuff was being reissued on vinyl. Was that because you just wanted to get it on vinyl, or what was just were fans requesting it on vinyl?
Well, I've been kickstarting, like, I think my last 13 things have been done through Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And so they're crowdfunded, and I think it was the first one I did on vinyl was Remnants of Deeper Purity, the 96 album. And it was people were asking for it on vinyl. And I was like, okay, but is there really interested in it on vinyl? I don't know. But if I do a crowdfunding, it will kind of tell me if there is or not.
Right.
And there was. I mean, I'm in the third pressing on that double LP now. So then I've done new albums and also reissues. So early, I guess maybe in February, I'm going to do another 2 LP reissue crowdfunder. And what I really like about the crowdfunding is, you know, I'm interacting again with the fans, and the people who love the music in a way that if you just put out an album, you're not, because then it's like, here's a new album, go to Spotify. But this is much more, both you're having to go out there and like sell yourself part, but it's also that I'm communicating with people. And it's just interesting because part of what makes crowdfunding work is finding like the higher end backers who are looking for, you know, whatever I might have, if I have handwritten lyrics from the era or something. And just to reconnect with people, some of them who I haven't heard from in 20 years, and some of them are people who love the band who I didn't know. And you're not just an anonymous CD sale in a record store, you know.
Right.
It's actually, oh, hey, cool. And then there's people I communicate with who I've met through that now. And I'm like, I know Scott is it Bloomington? Scott in some city up there in the cold part is a really big fan. And he's into this. And there was a guy in Pittsburgh who just loved the Ashes and the Burlayer album. And he was always asking me about these tracks I never finished. 15 years. And I was like, hey, Randy, I'm finally going to do it. I'm finally going to mix those songs. And, at the time, artist angst and stuff, I hated them. I was upset with them. And then I finally mixed them right, which I couldn't do back then because of the equipment. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I totally am fine with these songs now. It's just, trying to mix on an 8-track through a shitty live soundboard.
Yeah. Did you think, and I know this is one of those questions that a lot of people get asked, but did you think it's been what, since you first started, almost 40 years, 30,
right. Almost 40.
Did you think that in 2021, at this time that you would have people wanting to crowdfund your music and get it out there and vinyl and stuff? Like, did you know like that was going to happen?
No way. I mean, it's even like with the label that I knew I was going to have a label. No, I thought it was going to be in journalism or TV film. And the label kind of just took over my time in the early 90s. I mean, I think, one can always look back and see choices one made. And when 97, when Black Tape for a Blue Girl was like really big, it was the biggest band on the label, I made choices to work on the label rather than the band. And I can see now, okay, that was my own internal issues with success or with, you know, having to be a musician and all this stuff, where I could say, hey, Sam, you should have made a different choice back then.
Right.
And so almost like I can see I made incorrect choices and I'm surprised that it turned out okay, you know. And then my son was born in 2002 and that definitely slowed down everything. You know, I have a discography graphic, and there's this, what is it? 99 to 2009 was only maybe 4 albums. And now I've done, including instrumental electronic albums, I've done like 7 albums in the last 8 years or something like that, you know. So there was other things like life that also slowed it down.
Yeah.
But I figured when the industry was slumping prior to streaming, I thought this is over. I mean, you know, you can ride this out, but the industry was just in such a decline everywhere, not just for bands I worked with.
Right. So your son is what now? 18, 19?
He's 19 now. Yeah.
Wow. So how does he dig dad's music?
I think what he says is, I like that, but you play it over and over and over again. When I'm recording, you know, it's like, I gotta fix that little bit.
Right.
And I don't like headphones, so I'm just playing it. I mean, he's off to college now, but when he was around, it's like,
yeah.
You gonna play that again? Yes, I am.
It's
always a little 10-second bit you're playing over and over again until you get it just right, which I find tedious, and I have to do it. So,
well, what kind of music does he listen to?
Hard drives running. I don't know. He's into computer stuff, so I don't know. He could come and shout, but I'm not. He's home for the holiday, but I don't know. I don't think it's really that important to him.
Yeah,
that's my guess. But it's interesting. I mean, for people who have kids, you really measure time. It's like, oh wow, look at that. You know, okay, that album's 20 years old, but it doesn't feel the same as that human is 20 years old.
Right.
You know,
right. How much of him has influenced some of your stuff that you've written since he was born and stuff?
There's one song a couple albums back that is kind of like the imagining on my deathbed, what I would say kind of thing. And it's really, I mean, I was talking to my partner Mercy about this. There was once an interview I did like in 86 or 87, and the guy was like, so remember middle school, the best time of your life? How do you feel now? And I'm like, middle school is not the best time of my life, you know?
That's a weird way to put it.
It is. And I'm just like, right now is the best time of my life, you know? And hopefully it's that way for everybody, but if not, try to make it, you know, what you can do to make this the best time. And so, and the song was kind of like, yeah, I'm dying, but I had a good time. You know,
I know it's kind of morbid. I ask people this question sometimes, but if there was a song to play at your funeral, what song would that be?
Oh boy, I don't know if I have an answer to that.
I know it's a tough question.
I've never really thought about it.
Yeah.
Isn't Hallelujah like the number one song now or something like that? There was another one. There was 2 songs like that. And it's like, I don't think that's what he was writing about.
So Leonard Cohen, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
it was in England. Hallelujah's like number 2 or something like that. But I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. For some reason, I always think about when I'm thinking about that type of stuff, Host of Seraphim always comes to mind for some reason.
I Can Dance.
Yeah. It just sounds like a song that you would have like your death march to for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I remember briefly Brendan Perry was going to start a label. And I think I remember Philip Glass, the guy who ran his label, was going to start a darkwave label. And it's like, okay, you want to take me out to sushi? Sure, I'm there. But because you were asking about people who were influential. And people have asked me, but I mean, I just sort of really stumbled through it. I think the oddest thing, I watched, a documentary on the New York no wave scene or, whatever, Joan Jett or Twisted Sister. And it's over and over major labels going, I can't see this band selling. It's like, it's fucking Twisted Sister. They made so much money for a label when someone finally figured the shit out.
Yeah.
And so there were some bands and projects at some times where I'm like, why didn't a major label come pick up this artist? When they were succeeding or when Lycia was touring and Typo Negative was like really high on them, it's like people at major labels they're dense. They just sort of, I think, mainly follow what they already know how has been done.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
Do you know offhand what release you had put out on Projekt that was the bestseller?
Yeah, sure. The bestseller was a compilation that we did with Hot Topic. In, I don't know, 90 something, it's like 25,000 or something like that. And then the Christmas album we put out in 95 was the bestseller. It's a compilation. But then Black Tapes Remnants of a Deeper Purity was the bestseller CD. But you know, it's now impossible to measure because the things at the top are all through streaming. You know, so it's much harder to tell you. I know what's streaming, but did those streams add up to more than what that CD once did?
Right.
But yeah, but even like Remnants of Deeper Purity, it was not a mainstream album. It's a lot of like long instrumental passages with strings. You know, Arvo Part and Gavin Bryars were probably the big influences on that album. You know, and but for whatever reason, it was just the right time, and there were a couple songs that had catchier vocals. But you know, it's if you were to listen to it and say, do you think this album or this album is more popular? Why would that one get picked?
Right. How did that
much a fluke of the time?
Sure. How did the Hot Topic thing come about?
Well, Hot Topic, you know, was a goth clothing store at the time, and we were a goth label, and so yeah, so we were distributed through Ryko distribution before they got destroyed by Warner Brothers, and they were connected to Hot Topic trying to sell our records into there. And they used to be these counter CDs that for like 2 months some label would have a CD on the counter.
I see.
So we did 2 of them, and one was Project Gothic and one was Project New Face of Goth. And you know, they were like $3 on the counter or whatever. So a lot of people bought them and then took them home and went, "Who are these bands?" But it exposed people to the bands on the label, so that was good for us.
Yeah.
But it was mom, buy me this. Like, what is it? I don't know.
It's like when you get to the checkout counter, you make that impulse buy before you leave, you know?
Sure. And it was so cheap and it was right there. And,
yeah.
But even like the name, The New Face of Goth was like, just absurd. Yeah, sure. Why not call it that? You know?
Yeah.
To imply it was more goth than it was, I think. You know, Voltaire was on it. I think More Syphilitica was on it. They were catchy goth music.
Sure.
But some of it was not at the same time.
Yeah. You mentioned there was a Christmas release too, or
Projekt has 2 full-length Christmas releases and then an EP. And the Excelsis Christmas LP came out in 95. This did, you know, it was the only goth Christmas LP for a long time. And it's up digitally, and it just reissued it because it's been out of print for a while.
Are you a fan of Christmas music?
Oh no, hell no. Sorry. I you know, yeah, once the label group guy was like, "Sam, you should do an entire Black Tape Christmas album." And I'm like, my favorite Christmas song is Oscar the Grouch's "I Hate Christmas." And
fitting.
Quite good. It sounds a bit like Alice Cooper, the vocals, you know. So nice. I think the guy who did Oscar was influenced by early 70s glam, I think.
So if you were listening to the radio, what's that Christmas song that comes on that you have to change the station?
All of them. Oh God. Going into supermarkets or whatever this time, it's terrible. Sorry. I know some people love Christmas music, but we were raised pretty agnostic in my house. So
what about Halloween?
I don't know. This is Halloween. Just pick a song off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, you know, and I think, well, the Christmas album was also Pat's idea. So Pat, we have a band called Thanatos, and we had 2 albums together. And then Pat started working in Chicago. He was working with William Tucker, who played with a lot of the Wax Trax bands. And Thanatos sort of became a little more rock and toured for years. And then we last year put out Portland, which was our first album together, like in 20 years or whatever. I mean, we've been friends. It's just he's worked on his own. Yeah.
Didn't Stephen Beer work at all with Thanatos at some point from Marilyn Manson?
Yeah, he did the graphic. It was like these 2 World War I hand grenades that crossed over with Thanatos over it, I believe.
Right.
He did that. You know, you said that name, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was that. Yeah. Yeah, Pat knew him. Because I think Pat was in Florida longer than I was. I left in 86. And so Pat, I believe, knew Manson people in the early days, but I was out of there. I had this one compilation called Tunnel Zone on some German label was a studio in Miami that Manson used to record at. They have a track on there. But yeah, you know, it's like I was telling you before we started recording, like Marlboro Country by Charlie Pickett, you know, that came out when I was down there, and that like sound and that record is just very much that era for me. You know, and the lyrics about broken up relationships and stuff related, and you know, and now okay, that sounds a lot like Heroin by Velvet Underground. I get it now, you know. But not Marlboro Country, whichever one is the one that's about scoring, and Overtown. Yeah.
Overtown.
You know? Yeah. But then also, you know, I just had this theory that Charlie used feedback whenever he didn't want to address the emotional pain of his character in his song. If you listen to that album, whenever they start squealing, it's like, that's when the pain is really intense.
Yeah.
So I have a theory about it.
What was it like for you in 2016 when you came back to Florida with Black Tape for a Blue Girl, and you did a record?
We did a release party.
Yeah.
Well, it was, what was it like? I think, fortunately, Danny, who was the vocalist then, who was Oscar's daughter, and Oscar could play, so they played an acoustic song at the in-store, which was, or well, whatever you call it. It was at a really like a nice high-end stereo place. I was kind of odd having to listen to a whole album with people.
Yeah.
Because it's a 4-side album. It's long.
Yeah.
But you know, it sounded really good on the $50,000 stereo. So, you know, but it was, I mean, I feel, I guess, so disconnected from Florida now because I haven't lived there for so long that, you know, I think that area is like the hot art district now or whatever, but I was, you know, it was a sort of, I felt disconnected where they still felt, you know, that's where they lived. So they
right
to the people and the place.
Were there certain places down there that you tried to maybe seek out that have any kind of nostalgic value for you down there?
No, sorry. Yeah, there's a video I put on YouTube for a song called Slow Blur, an instrumental off the first album, and I shot it at some parking garage in Fort Lauderdale, and you know, I have no idea where it was.
Yeah.
But you know, so I kind of have my memories of Florida are sort of in these videos that don't exist the place anymore. Where, yeah, I mean, there was some place on the beach that Hallandale, I don't know, Dania, where we used to see bands, and it wasn't like Finders. It was way before that. It was some club where I saw like Radio Berlin and other bands. But no. I mean, I can go to Florida now just like as any other tourist, I think is the main thing. It's like, oh, it's sticky here. Oh, there's alligators here. You know, when you go out, what is that ice cream stand way out in the Everglades? Bob was here or whatever it's called.
In the Everglades. I didn't know
no,
that
it's down in like Hialeah. When you're heading out, there's this. Anyway, who knows? You can tell my memory is not complete of these things that happen.
I didn't spend a lot of time in Hialeah. I done some, when I used to do a driving job, I'd been there, but I would get in and get out. So.
Yeah, Oscar lives down that way. And I'm not sure where Danny lives now, but yeah, I mean, the most recent album, the singer is in LA and the string player is in Sweden. So, you know, and I'm here, the band is totally not.
Right.
We're not in the same place. I've never met the string player. I think it's kind of fun having band members you've never met.
Yeah.
You know, there was a guitarist on previous album, the one before that, and we met after we had recorded all this stuff. It's a sort of entertaining what you can do now.
Yeah. 2001 Space Odyssey seemed to have influenced you a little bit. Is that true?
Yeah, there's a side project as lonely as Dave Bowman, and Dave Bowman was one of the two astronauts in 2001. And so I just, well, it was the first album, Pod, it was sort of a challenge of, I want to record an album in a week. I don't want to take 2 years like I usually do. And so I had like an assignment to just go in the studio and record and make this album. And then I just sort of, I don't know why I just started, well, actually, my son loved 2001 when he was like 4 or something like that. And so that probably was around the same time. So it just like, okay. And so I sort of integrated some of the character name from that. And then the second one, Monolith, I brought a little bit more in where, you know, the song titles are named after events. So sort of if you read 2001 and 2010, but imagine Hal didn't go crazy, I took that part out. Yeah. So it's just the loneliness of going out somewhere and you're never coming back, you know.
Nice.
Because the idea that people are going to go to Mars and then come home to Earth, no, that's not the way it's going to happen.
How do you
you're going and you're going to space.
how do you feel with all the space stuff happening now, and Bezos and what's the other dude's name? I'm drawing a blank.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, and you got William Shatner going to space.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on all that?
So my thoughts are, I think space travel is good and important, but I think billionaires should be helping people on Earth and not wasting their money jacking off on their rockets. It's like the headline is Elon Musk goes to space, masturbates, comes home. I mean, it's like, come on, that money could be much better spent helping the people that made them billionaires.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit more of a socialist, that those fuckers should be taxed at 60%, 70%, and it should help everybody. And while I do agree space travel is important, but the idea that you're going to colonize Mars and have an other place in case humanity destroys itself, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Do you ever find that some of that stuff going on current events wise will make it into any of your music lyrically?
See, I don't think so, but like John asked, is this related to something? And to me, it's like, I don't think so, but it does get in there. Yeah. So running a label during the pandemic, so many artists had more time to record music. And after like the third one sheet, I'm like, we're not mentioning the pandemic anymore. We're not saying because of the additional time or because of the lockdown. It's just, we all know we went through this, So I don't feel like anything is about that, especially the new album, because it's like sort of these characters I've been thinking about for quite a while, and the dynamic and the conflict between, it has to do, I guess, what we all face, which is time, and we are creating problems and having problems, and then we are going to be dead. And are we going to be these problems? Is that going to be who we are?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not any one current event. That is just all of our situation. And there was a song 2 albums back it's called Desert Rat Kangaroo, and it's basically what makes human think that God thinks we're more important than some species that is extinct now because of us, So that's current events, but that song is pretty Deck and Dance sounding too, but it sort of started coming out that way. But then the lyrics are just a little bit more like, really, you people think you humans are more important than a mouse? The mouse thought it was really important too,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm going to go into a segment where I just kind of throw out a couple random questions to you and just kind of see how the responses kind of come in and everything like that. So ready to go through a few?
Okay, it's the speed round.
Speed round, lightning round. Here we go. So thinking about what's your greatest and most memorable memory of South Florida?
Okay, it actually was the shitty Datsun in that photo, driving on the highway too fast and the hood flying up and hitting the roof.
Yeah, let me bring up the picture so people can get a visual here of what that looks like.
Okay, so that is my old Datsun station wagon and me. I'm guessing 81 to 83, and I would load that thing up with my magazines, which weighed a ton in the back, and then going up to West Palm to drop them off at Specs or Peaches or whatever was up there. And then I was driving on the highway, and this is before the car had the bolts that held the hood shut.
Oh God!
One day the hood just flew up, and I couldn't see anything anymore on the highway. So
that's a fun story, and
then I had nightmares for years about running into things with that car. So
I'm glad that was actually, and it's so interesting you brought up the word nightmares, because I was going to ask the next lightning round question was thinking about a lot of the lyrics you have written over the years. How many songs have you written that were about nightmares or just bad dreams?
Well, it's interesting because there's one song and the lyric is nightmares are better than having no dreams at all. So that, yeah. So there was an element of nightmares of just things. I think a lot of the early songs were more take one event, freeze it, and then overanalyze it. Which you're creating your own nightmare that way. Like we're thinking shit.
For some reason, I got that. Like when I'm listening to a lot of the music, some of it just sounds like it came from a dream in some way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think because of my style of not knowing what I'm doing, it is unconscious coming out, you know.
It's funny. Who is the, was there an artist or a band that perhaps you wanted to put out on your label, but for whatever reason, it just didn't happen?
So I mentioned the band Oyuki Conjugate, and their album after the one on Project called Equator. I just love the album, but it got put out by Soleil Moon, a label here in Portland. And so that was one I wish had been on the label. There are bands who had come to the label who I was too hoity-toity to put out because I thought they were too commercial. And now I'm like, that was stupid. That band was good. That record that they recorded after that was good. That would have been great for the label. But, you know, there were some incorrect choices.
Well, in almost 40 years of doing this, what would you say was the biggest lesson you've learned?
You know, I think it's opportunities don't come up often. And we as humans have this mistaken belief that, oh, I'm talented enough that another opportunity will come along. And I feel like if it comes, grab it. And, you know, people are, I have a friend who he was in school and he had an offer to be REM's like PR person when they were small. And he was like, well, I got to finish college first. And it's like, you could have been REM's PR person, you know, and you know now what became of REM. So it's really, I think, and I know we all don't have the opportunity to just throw everything down, quit that job, but there are some opportunities that we overlook because we think we'll get another one.
How much longer do you think you'll be doing this for?
Yeah. I mean, I am fortunate that I can sit at my own home and be my own boss and do my job on my computer. And so, you know, it's lame to complain about it, but I have been doing the same job for 30 years. So I don't know. I mean, I would like to do less of the record label job.
What's it? Yeah. I mean,
I can't imagine being not doing it.
Yeah. Considering how long you've been doing it for, that would be a pretty, it's like being at the same job for, you know, almost 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, it was the fanzine going to college, but in 91, it became a full-time job. It was just busy. And at one time I had 11 people working for Projekt, and now it's me and a couple part-timers in other cities. But, you know, so I'm fortunate this is what I do, and
yeah,
the cat gets fed, you know. But it's also, you know, I kind of feel like if I weren't doing this, I would find something else interesting that I would be doing. But because I am doing this, I don't have the time to find that.
What would that be, you think?
Yeah, you know, something. It would be something. I don't know. I mean, even like, you know, and okay, it's because of the pandemic, but I would probably be helping the communists feed the houseless people down at the park that's near here. But I'm kind of like, you know, paranoid about the pandemic. So there'd be other things to do that would I work at home. I make music at home. And as I said, my band isn't in this city. I don't interact with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's something more out there.
Sure. Give us an example. What's a typical day like for Sam Rosenthal?
Get up, make breakfast, sit at the computer, go up and down the stairs to the basement about 30 times. Like, I don't do the mail order here, but there's still, I got to box up things for the distributor or whatever. Designing album covers. When an album comes in, I end up listening to the same album like 10 times within you know, a 2-week period, because you have to proof the files, have to upload the files, have to proof the files, you know. And so there's a lot of sitting at the computer and a lot of like sort of listening to the same music for a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of computer work, I guess.
I bet. And you take demos, I assume, right?
You know, not in the old fashioned sense of getting a demo in the mail. Like a guy had sent me, hey, listen to this track. And quite often those pile up, but it was very easy. They had a SoundCloud playlist. So it was very easy just to hit play. And I was like, oh yeah, this is better than just putting on a compilation. You know, this fits in with what Projekt people sort of, you know, there's a lot of fans of the 90s era Projekt. So it fits in with a sort of the noise ambient side. And so, you know, sometimes I wasn't looking for a demo that day, but that one actually was appropriate, where a lot of the music isn't appropriate at all. And that's the problem.
Sure. Was there ever a demo that you rejected that you regretted?
Well, yeah, like I said, I guess it was maybe it was a couple bands in LA that were more band-like. But
I see.
You know, No, it never was The Cure or something. It was never like
Right.
a massive band and you're like, oh, that band.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you've gotten how many would you say you've received over the years?
Well, I mean, it used to be just people would mail stuff in. And
Yeah.
So much stuff. And now it's like, you know, if I go to my Facebook, there's all these listen to my demo email messages, but you can't say, I don't know. And it was also people used to buy these books of places to send their demos, and I guess we were in it. So, you know, we would get some stuff that was so wrong for the label that we would actually you know, have the torture afternoon where you just put stuff on to get through it. And it's just like, why did he send this to us? It just doesn't make any sense. You know, picture of a guy on a boat looking like Billy Joel, you know, songwriting stuff. It's just like, no. Captain is jail. You look more like the captain, actually.
Yeah, I guess you never know. There might be one day a subsidiary. Maybe when you're in your 70s, you may want to do a yacht rock wing of your label.
Yeah, no, it's just not what I'm into. You know, it's like all that. You know, I did like it in the 70s. You know.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of blues or blues-based music, generally speaking. I'm not a fan of jazz. You know, there's stuff that there's no point in sending that to me. I would not know what to do with it if it was good. You know?
Right. Speaking of some of the new music, if you had to kind of pick out one or two, who is some new artists or some new bands that you're listening to that you think others should listen to?
The problem is that when I say this new band, I realize they've been out for like 10 or 12 years. And it's like, oh, they're not so new anymore. So a band I like that most people don't know, they're called Spiritual Front. They're from Italy. And they kind of say they're like Morrissey and Johnny Cash mashed together. So, and the songs are, you know, about drugs and depravity. And I'm just very entertained by them, but they're not new. You know, their album Armageddon Gigolo came out, I don't know, 2006 or something like that. It's been out. So yeah, I'm up on new music in the specific genre I release.
Right.
You know, and there's like another Italian artist named Jarguna, and he puts out about 3 albums a year. And there's something about Italian ambient music that has a very organic feeling to it. So there's an Alio Diaz, another Italian artist, and I that sort of if I put something on, I think what's that word? I gyrate? No, gyrate's not the word. I moved towards Italian music or something. Yeah. There's just, I don't know. There's something textural about it that I like.
One of my favorite genres of music is like Italian library music. Did you ever get into some of that stuff?
Library, like, you know,
like stuff from like TV shows and soundtracks, and like just like very, very like loungy or very like jazz and funk and that type stuff.
So there's an Italian artist I put out. His name is Alan Electronico, and it's synthwave, Italo disco, space disco.
Okay.
And so that was like Giorgio Moroder sort of influenced sound in the late 70s. And I just love his album because it's just entertaining. It is catchy. It is fun. And I put that out earlier this year. So you know, and there's some Italian like Fizzy Water used one of his songs in their commercial, and the commercial is so, you know, library music looking, you know, except that it is like his new original song. It's not something kind of meant for that purpose.
Right.
But, yeah.
And you haven't.
He's a new artist. There you go.
There you go. So I really appreciate all the time today and spending this afternoon chatting and taking a trip down memory lane from the early beginnings in Fort Lauderdale all the way through some of the other places that you had been. So to kind of close out the interview, I want to kind of give you an opportunity to share whatever you'd like with your fans, the people who have been following you for years, both new and, you know, current, perhaps future fans. Anything you'd like to share to kind of close out the interview?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I am lucky that I get to sit in this chair and the cat runs by and I can do work at home on something that I care about, and that there's people who care about it also. You know, you asked, did you think you'd be doing this? No, if you asked me 30 years ago, I'd be like, nobody's going to remember what I was doing then, and I'll have moved on. So it's really nice to be able to still be doing it and talk about it and have, you know, people who still care about it, the old stuff and the new stuff that's coming out. So it's cool.
Yeah, it's great. You have such a long discography and all these different projects. So that's what's nice about a lot of your music too, is maybe if I'm not into some of the other stuff, like maybe the more ambient stuff, I can listen to the more of the goth kind of stuff, you know, and get different vibes out of the music that you have been producing all these years.
Yeah, I think my band has always mixed those sort of two sides, the gothier side and the Eno-esque side, you know. So it's both in there.
Good deal. Well, thank you so much again, Sam, for taking the time to do the interview. It was a pleasure having you on, and I think a really wonderful way to end 2021 with our interview here today. So thanks again for all the time and being a wonderful guest.
Yes, thank you so much for your time.